Hey everyone, welcome back to Fact or Fictional, the show where we look at cool tech and science from your favorite TV shows, movies, video games, comic books, and ask, is that really possible? And if not, why not? Well, on the dream-ruining continuation, John Rettinger from Techno Buffalo and Driven came by last week to basically tell me that I will never have the high-speed chase of my dreams where I launch my car off a bridge 50 feet into the air or like alternately jump off of that car to another car. But now at least I won't try, so we can continue to produce more episodes of the show. But you guys had some things to say on YouTube. Zreen001 says, "Who cares? It's an action movie about racing cars and stuff blowing up. It's a movie to sit down and eat popcorn and smile at." Yeah, I know. I know that Fast and Furious is like an entertainment vehicle. Haha, get it? Entertainment vehicle. It's a vehicle for, you know, fun, action, crazy movie stuff, but that's the whole point of the show. I mean, we enjoy looking at that kind of stuff. We want to know if we could launch a car 50 feet off a bridge, just because there's fun in knowing, you guys. But anyway, this is our very special Father's Day episode, and most of you out there know that I am a huge Game of Thrones fan. I have read all of the Song of Ice and Fire books. I've actually interviewed George R.R. Martin in the past, and I love the HBO series. And when they said, hey, we should do an episode for Father's Day, I'm like, what would be a good topic for Father's Day? Joffrey's paternity. Would Ned Stark ever really have been able to prove that Joffrey was not the son of Robert Baratheon? And so I took to Twitter to find the perfect person to talk to about this topic, someone who knew Game of Thrones and someone who knew about historical genealogy. And Lou at Vagabond Tweets wrote back and said, how about at Kris Williams 81, former ghost hunter, now working with Ancestry.com, big Game of Thrones fan, and I said, perfect. So joining us today on the show is popular blogger and historical researcher Kris Williams to talk about just that. Hi Kris, thank you so much for joining us. So tell me a little bit about your background as a ghost hunter.
I was a ghost hunter, yes. I worked for Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi, and I also worked for Ghost Hunters International. So I've been throughout the US and around the world hunting for ghosts. The whole idea was to try to find rational reasons for why things are happening. So
tell me about how you got into ancestry and genealogy.
I actually got into genealogy when I was 11 years old. My 4th grade teacher became an addict, and she decided to come into class and give all of her students the assignment of researching their family as well. So I went home and I started asking my grandparents questions, my parents questions, and I started hearing all these crazy stories, but there was one in particular that got me hooked. And it was a story that I descended from a woman who is hanged on the Boston Common in 1660 and buried in an unmarked grave. And there's actually a statue of her in front of the Boston State House. So it was my mission to try to figure out how I descended from her.
So the reason I brought you on the show was because I know that you are a huge Game of Thrones fan, the HBO show, of course.
Yes, I am. But TV version, I haven't read the books. I'm gonna get some I'll probably have some haters out there for that, but that's okay.
But the real topic of conversation actually came from a Twitter user, Jonathan Reber, who asks, is it possible to prove the paternity of Joffrey Baratheon, or at least disprove that Robert was his father? And this is something I've been curious about myself, because of course in the first season, Ned Stark is obsessed with finding out, you know, the true paternity to kind of prove who should or should not be on the throne. So I'm curious to know, is there some way that he could have proved this?
Honestly, I think the only thing they would have had to go on back then is records. We saw Ned going through the books of Robert's ancestors, and he was looking up all their names and naming off like their hair color, brown hair, brown hair, brown hair. Then you saw him visiting all of Robert's mistresses and checking out the bastard children, and they all had brown hair.
Now, is this typically how medieval genealogy would be figured out? Is it purely on records?
I've been doing this for a long time, and records are not always accurate. It all comes down to the person who actually filled the record out, and they do make mistakes. I see mistakes all the time in census records.
And then if there's a situation where there's like recessive genes, where suddenly a child is born that has blonde hair where the rest of the family had brown hair, for example, which is typically the dominant gene, I believe, based on my very limited knowledge of how that kind of thing works, it would be difficult to prove one way or the other. I mean, you can't just go off of hair and eye color.
You can't, you're right. Blonde hair is a recessive trait. So if Robert was carrying a recessive gene for blonde hair, and of course his wife is blonde, it's perfectly normal and natural for him to have a child that is blonde.
Right. So how has the technology evolved over the years?
So when I first started, it was all about going and visiting family and going to graveyards, and going to town halls and libraries, and everything was a lot of legwork. Then gradually the internet came in and they started downloading all these different documents, and they have people inputting all this information on different, there's a ton of different genealogy websites out there. And now they have DNA testing, which has come in. It's bringing genealogy to a whole new level.
It seems like if we had DNA testing back in medieval times or back in the, faux historical times of Game of Thrones, there'd be a lot less bloodshed over, birthrights and ascension laws.
I don't know about that.
You don't know? You think it'd be worse?
Well, think about the last 2 elections and everybody going crazy over whether or not our president's birth certificate was for real. I think that one of the biggest things we've always been good at it as humans is fighting each other. And honestly, if we were able to prove, Joffrey was the son of Robert, would Khaleesi back off and go home with her dragons?
I don't think so.
Probably not. So they'd still
right.
be fighting, they'd still be battling. I don't think it would have changed anything. And with how horrible that kid is, I think many people would probably join the fight to take him out.
Yeah, no matter whose son he was.
Exactly.
So how incestual were things back then? I know we're using a fake timeline because we don't actually live in the Game of Thrones timeline, but to kind of compare it to our own history, were a lot of bloodlines getting crossed pretty regularly?
It depends on the time period and the region. I mean, different areas would follow different rules. I've heard some rumors of certain places trying to keep the blood pure so they marry within the family. However, I heard during medieval times that wouldn't happen as much. People could actually protest a marriage if the two people were too closely related. So you couldn't have a brother-sister marriage, but you could marry your first cousin.
So it sounds like from our discussion that Ned Stark probably never had a chance in hell of proving Joffrey's parentage, really no matter what he did. I mean, he could bring up some documents and show some things, but at the end of the day, it was probably a lost cause no matter what.
It was definitely a lost cause. I mean, there's absolutely no way to prove for sure that Joffrey was the son of Robert in those times. It was impossible.
Yeah, he definitely looks like he came from 2 blondes. I'm just gonna put that out there.
It's possible, but I mean, at the end of the day, I think, like I said, I think the war would have still happened. Ned probably still would have. He probably still would have died at the hands of Joffrey. That would have been my guess, but who knows?
Well, it's kind of hard to put it in fact or fictional guidelines, but I'm gonna have to say that it is fact that Ned Stark would have been no matter what. Yeah, there's just really no way he could have proven Joffrey's paternity, but it makes for good storytelling. But if you have any ideas for things that you want to see on the show, let me know at Veronica, or post on Facebook or Google Plus in this episode's comments and let me know what you want to see and who you want to see on the show. That's it for this episode. If you want to see more episodes of Fact or Fictional, make sure you come back to TechFeed at youtube.com/TechFeed every Friday for more goodness. Until next time, I'm Veronica. See you later.